It's prospect update season, and so we have a good friend, Aram Leighton, waiting to talk to us. We're going to talk about the Twins not only individually, but as a team, where they rank with everybody else, and all that kind of fun stuff. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello again, and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren. You can unfollow me on the tweets at Brandon_WARNE. Been watching the Twins for 3 decades, covering them for about half that long. And conspicuous by his absence is Mr. Dave Brown, but in his seat is more than capable Mr. Aram Leighton. He is the Twins prospect guru expert of note here, at least in our eyes, and you can follow him on the tweets at Aram Leighton 8. What's up, my good friend?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to talk about one of the best systems in baseball. So appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, eager to hear from you again. Things have changed a little bit around here. We got a new entrance, little video, and all kinds of fun stuff. So we'll talk about that. But first, thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And of course, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we're your team every day. Love to hear from you in the chat. 5-star reviews on Apple Pods. All that stuff is very good and very important. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And you can catch every pitch of the Twins' hometown broadcast with Chris Atterbury and friends on SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search Twins. Up next for your Twins, it's going to be Bailey Ober, looking to continue his tremendous streak. Speaking of guys who came up through the Twins system. And he'll be facing Rangers lefty Cody Bradford. First pitch slated for 7:05 Central at Globe Life Field. Looking like Ober, Bradford, SWR Heaney, Festa, Evaldi, and Lopez Malley. So we'll have some fun with that. But again, we got to get back to this farm system stuff. It's update season, and as we've seen, the Twins are number 2 on MLB Pipeline, which was surprising to me. 3 for Baseball America, and then 4 with Kylie McDaniel over at ESPN. Aram, one thing I want to ask you about before you rank the Twins is you do not have Brooks Lee in your top 100, so I would assume he's a graduate.
Yes.
Is that okay? And so that might affect your ranking compared to theirs, because he's just a touch under using up his rookie status, and so different places have different reasons for that. When did he cross that threshold for you guys to eliminate him from your rankings?
Yeah, so for us, I always like to try to keep the list fresh. And as you've seen through the years, there's been so many instances where like players will be up and down, banged up. Like how many years in a row did we have Royce Lewis ranked? So like situations like that, we like usually like to cut it off at about 100 plate appearances. And I understand it can create some confusion across lists. And that's something I always try to put like as a disclaimer on the top, because it's really just for the sense of being able to keep it fresh and talk about more new players. And, I think by the 3rd or 4th year of, Royce Lewis, there's not much new that you needed to know. You knew if he was on the field, he's going to be a star. If he's not going to be able to be a star. So like those types of instances, guys that come up, in parts of 3 seasons will also graduate at the big league level. But yeah, Brooks Lee had just graduated through that threshold, but would have definitely been comfortably in the top 50 for us.
And so when you think of where you have the Twins right now with versus without Brooks Lee, I mean, do you fall in the range of these other ones? Again, adjusting for Brooks Lee being in or out, where are you on this farm system?
I think it's top 5 in Major League Baseball without a doubt, because you've got the combination of elite talent at the top. Walker Jenkins for me is a top 5 prospect in baseball. Emmanuel Rodriguez for us is top 10. But then just the depth that has been generated here as well, right? Just nailing Luke Keyshaw, who unfortunately is out, but I'm glad they finally took care of that elbow issue. It was so annoying seeing him, in the field. And then I felt so bad for him because he has to go back to first base and then DH and then back in the field again. So like get it right, get himself feeling good. He's got plenty of time to make up for lost time. And I think he'll be just fine. but nailing him was huge. That's a top 100 guy for us. Zebby Matthews breakout, absolutely massive. Another top 100 guy. What a debut from him as well. And then you've got the Festas and, the CJ Culpeppers of the world, and then the Charlie Sotos. I just think there's so much depth here, and that's not even talking about the draft, right? And Kalen Culpepper, who I really like, is a high floor piece. So when you look at it from that lens, and then just the pitching at the bottom, like a Corey Lewis and Andrew Morris, the combination of top end talent and depth for me is just what makes this clearly a top 5 system.
Yeah, it's not like the old days when you have like 4 big time huge guys that you're going to trade for, like a CC Sabathia. You kind of have to be a self-feeding system where it just kind of keeps it going in waves. And I guess for me, it's more important, more, how do I want to put this? It's more impressive that this system is as good as it is. And then you consider, hey, Brooks Lee's Brooks Lee, in your case, is in the major leagues. He's not ranked. Royce Lewis, they've got Jose Miranda. They've got some young players who are either not ranked and are helping the team, or are not ranked and could be considered at least helpful, whether you think, Alex Kirilloff can still make a difference if he ever gets healthy, or wherever you stand on Trevor Larnach. Matt Wallner has been hitting the crap out of the ball.
Oh my gosh.
He came back. I mean, when you look at a team and you say, where do you rank teams in terms of young talent? And I'll let you make that definition your own. The Twins have to be right there with everybody else, don't they?
Oh my gosh. I love that you brought that up, because that's something like an off-season initiative I wanted to do, because it is a little bit misleading when you have farm system rankings that, won't account for the players that had just graduated but are extremely young. So like talent under 27 years old, or we're going to try to figure out what the exact age was to cut that off, like is still huge. We're talking about years of control. We're just talking about youth. And like, if you look at it from the lens of probably 28 years old for the Twins, because just some prospects that just have not been able to stay healthy, but still have plenty of intrigue. Like, I think Matt Wallner is a perfect example of that, right? Where he's not 27 yet, but has finally figured it out to the point where you're seeing him mash consistently. I still think Trevor Larnach, in terms of tools, can be such a fun player. And Kirilloff, I mean, it really has just been a matter of health, I feel like, because when he's on the field, especially at the upper levels of the minors, we see him rake. So that's just another player that, like, sure, he's not a prospect anymore and he's not producing at the big league level, but it would be silly to just not account for him when you're looking at the grand scheme of the franchise and what they look like. So yeah, to your point, I think when you look at the talent from, age 28 and under, like sneakily, Pablo Lopez is only 28. But when you look at it from that lens, like, I think they're up there with just about anybody. And especially with the progression that we've seen from Simeon Woods Richardson, now turning into a guy that, even if you're not fully sold on what he's done this year in terms of being able to replicate it exactly, you have to be sold that this is a big league, at least back of the rotation arm that can be solid and eat innings. And like, that's a huge development. We were at a point in time where he was struggling in AAA. So I think with that as well, Ober to me feels younger than 29. I don't know what it is. It just feels like, and I think he pitches like it too. But yeah, in terms of young talent, man, I think they're up there with just about anybody.
Yeah, Larnach, I mean, say what you will about StatCast sliders, they get to be, overrated, underrated, and everywhere in between. But he's a lot of red there. So I mean, the hope is that he can continue to swing it. He had a couple of plate appearances against a lefty that I thought were better than I expected recently. Okay, I'm gonna bring up 2 names, and I want to know which prospect you hold out more hope for as we get ready to go into our first break here, because they're both in a similar position of, man, they could be good, but just can't get out of their own way health-wise. Alex Kirilloff and Matt Cantorino.
Oof, that's a really good one, because Cantorino, by the way, is just one of the nicest guys I think we've ever had on our prospect show. I'm sure you could speak to that. You do a great job, covering and connecting with these players too. But like, oh my gosh, he's so cool.
I've never heard a sideways word about him. He's incredible.
And one of my favorite guests we had early, I saw him in spring training. He looked fantastic. I was so excited. He comes on the show. I just could feel the excitement from him. And, it's really not a question with him about the stuff at all. Like, when he's on the mound, it's nasty. I mean, some of the most dominant numbers that we've ever like really seen in the last couple of years when he is on the mound. I just have more concern that he's really ever going to be able to be on that mound. Kirilloff too. It's just like you wonder when he's going to be able to string it together. And I really feel like this year it's just been kind of lost because of the different injuries and trying to play through different things, because he knows how frustratingly unavailable he's been. I'm always going to side with the bat when we see kind of a perpetually injured player. And I think Kirilloff, I just have always loved the swing. you look at some of the stretches that he had when he was, a top prospect, it was as impressive as anybody. I still hold out hope for him. And we've seen flashes too, even at the big league level, where it's like, he's that guy. So I believe in Canarino's ability. I'm just more concerned about him being able to be available to do it. And at this point, it's probably more in a relief role if he can. And I still think at 26, Kirilloff, you can stash him a little bit more and maybe get him out of the outfield, keep him more at first base, DH him more. I don't know. Yeah, you might know better than me on that front, but I still think that there's still too much potential with this bat to give up on him. And I think there's a reason why there's a lot of teams I think that would be excited to take a chance on him as a change of scenery candidate. I think there's a reason why the Twins haven't done that.
Yeah. And I think the thing people don't understand about a player in his specific situation is, why you play and you're hurting the team. Well, the window of opportunity to be a difference-making major leaguer is only open for so long. And whether you're healthy and good, healthy and bad, hurt and good, hurt and bad, like all of those different things are a different part of the calculus where you play through things because you want the team to believe that you're tough. You play through things because everyone's dealing with something. You play through things because you're young and you're still kind of getting a feel for what you can and can't play through. You're still trying to there's just so many reasons to play when you're not 100% at that age, that when people say, I don't know why he's playing through this, there's a lot of reasons why he's trying to play through these things.
Yeah. And you definitely want to fend off that label of injury prone. And of course, it's probably a little late for that, but I'm sure it's the last thing he wants to hear anymore. And it's a lot easier, I think, to fend off the label of, underperformer when you can perform. It's a lot harder to fend off the label of injury prone, because a lot of times that's just out of your control and it's anatomy. So, I think there's a big part of it that he wants to prove it. And then I think there's a big part of it that says, hey, I had a 120 WRC plus last year, before I went down. Like, I know that I can hit at the big league level. I just need to be out there. So I think that's the part too, where you almost forget how banged up you are and how much it actually is restricting you, because you just get so used to feeling uncomfortable. And I really think, unfortunately, Kirilloff, even when I watch him hit, like, it just looks like he's gotten used to feeling uncomfortable. But I know that there's an above average big league bat in there.
Right on. Well, we'll take our first break. And when we come back, I want to just kind of talk about the Twins in your top 100. I believe I see 5.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also not including Brooks Lee, as we said. So we'll talk about a couple of the back end guys who I'm more interested in, because obviously we hear a lot about Jenkins and Erod. But let's do this. Let's take our pause. And then when we come back, we'll dig right back into it. Game Time is the place to be if you want tickets, whether you're going to a ball game or if you're going to, like I am tomorrow, a concert, and it's the place to look for tickets, whether it's last minute, whether you're planning out in front. They've got you covered pretty much no matter what. As far as for me, Minneapolis, St. Paul, I can just look through, and all the venues are on there. I can figure out what shows are in town, and maybe if it's a Friday night and I don't have that much going on and I want to head downtown, I got options. My favorite features include flash deals, easy for me to say, zone deals. So flash deals are exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game time or the event that you're going to. And then zone deals is you pick a zone, let Game Time pick the seat for you, and you're in business. What I really like are 2 other things, though. All-in pricing means you toggle this bar, and it tells you exactly what you're going to pay at the end. There's not going to be any of this bait and switch at the back end where you're picking up fees, like a $20 here, $20 there, finding out that you're paying a lot more than you realize. And then the seat view, you get a panoramic seat view from where you're going to be, you get a pretty good idea of what you're looking at. And of course, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the game. And Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find the ticket you're at cheaper elsewhere. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB and all other tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so your top 100 includes, let's start from the back end. David Festa, I always call him Matt Festa because I'm used to the guy that I think pitched for the Mariners for a minute there, at 93. Luke Keeschel at 69. Zebby Matthews at 65. Emmanuel Rodriguez at 8. And Walker Jenkins at 3. To me, just flipping through the Rolodex in my brain, that puts you as the high man on Jenkins and possibly Rodriguez, and maybe actually each of these top 4 guys you might be the high man on.
I mean, for Walker Jenkins, I'm happy to be the high guy on him. I mean, I've loved him since, watching him on the amateur side of things, and just one of the most advanced amateur swings I'd seen in a while. Then just seeing him start to tap into a little bit more power, and he's still in the process of doing that. But really, I think getting more comfortable in tapping into that power, looking like he can play a viable center field too, right? This is a 6'3", 215-pound kid that moves well out there. The feel to hit for his kind of archetype, being a kid that's that big, high school, left-handed hitter, to be making the contact that he makes so consistently. The swing decisions are so advanced as well. Doesn't chase. He's walking much more than he strikes out. He's going to grow into more power, and that's kind of the last piece here. But it really is. It gets thrown out too much. But I really think he is that 5-tool guy when he's able to play in everyday center field. It's impossible to look at him and not think that he can grow into at least average. I think he's going to grow into above average power. And then the hit and approach are clearly right there. So you have the high floor, I think, relatively speaking. And then I think the ceiling is still so exciting as well that's a guy that I don't think there's 3 prospects I'm taking over him.
Does he have one of the 5 tools that you think is maybe underrated or like not standing out? You know what I mean? I would guess it's probably his running, because he's a 55 on pipeline, and that's just because I have an easy cheat sheet here. I'm not trying to butt in with your competitors, but
no, of course, I do great jobs, and it's helpful always just trying to compare those thoughts and notes. But I would say so. Like I think that we kind of had him right at the 55 fringe 60. I think when he gets healthy, like he's been holding back a little bit because of the hamstring and some of the elements he's had. When he's underway, he's a plus runner. It's just, can he consistently do that, or is he going to guard himself? And that's the thing that I'm kind of waiting on. I think the most underrated aspect of his game is that he can play in everyday center field and motor. I think everybody knows that he's a good hitter. Maybe they don't know that it could be a plus hit tool. But I think that paired with the fact that he can actually go get it in center field, it doesn't look like the kind of guy that would do that. That is, I think, really slept on. When you have that kind of offensive potential in a position like center, it just doesn't grow on trees.
I had someone ask about, it was Aaron wanting to know about Emmanuel Rodriguez and worry if his injury plays anything into his prospect ranking. Is he even higher yet healthy? Or are you just kind of like, listen, he is who he is. I'm not going to worry about an injury at this age. Obviously, again, you're probably the high man on him. Where do you stand, and where could that change?
Yeah, so this is one where, I don't know if he would have been higher if not for the injury, but it did create some pause. But ultimately, I thought about it from this lens: if I'm working a trade with the Twins, would I let that? I'm trading them my face of the franchise, and I want Emmanuel Rodriguez back. Would I let the injury, the thumb thing, and some of the other ailments that he's had steer me away from what he can be? And the answer was no. And if it was like a shoulder issue or some more structural stuff, I'd be more concerned. Seems like it's been more nagging stuff. It's always hard to tell in the minor leagues because teams, they don't have to disclose it like they do in the big. So it's always going to be close to their vest, and they're not going to tell you too much, and they're always going to misdirect you. But I think it really ultimately was, for me, just not enough to steer me off of him. We're talking about another guy, I think, where you look at a lot of old scouting reports on him. It was like, oh, because he's big and he's like his build, he's going to move off of center. He ain't moving off of center, man. Unless something drastic changes, he can go get it out there. So you have an above average defender in center field that runs. He bordered on passive before. Now it's patient and a good approach. This guy was chasing at a 10% clip this year. Like, that's outrageous. So he was always going to swing and miss, a fair deal, but now becoming that 3 true outcome guy, which is okay when you're playing good defense in center field and hitting home runs like crazy. He was stealing bags as much as ever as well, utilizing his speed in games. This is a dude that puts up some of the highest exit velocities in minor league baseball. It would put him in the top 5% in terms of 90th percentile exit velocity in Major League Baseball as a 21-year-old who can play center field, who's stealing bags. We're talking about, a guy that can hit 30 home runs, steal 20 plus bags, and play center field and get on base at a ridiculous clip. Even if he's hitting 230, he's going to walk so much and slug that he's still going to be a mid 800s OPS guy if it works out. But I still think he can hit more than that too. And he made strides in the bat to ball department this year too.
How hard is it to carry a skill set like that in the minors, where maybe strike zone stuff, at least, in AAA they do the zone, but I mean, in the minors, like, at least as far as I've always thought, it's obviously not as precise. The big league umpiring, for all the grief we give it, is pretty dang good.
Yes.
That to me, Rodriguez on the 40-man roster, so if he's healthy and can play, could be in the major leagues theoretically tomorrow. How do you account for all that?
That's an excellent question. And I think it's one of the more fascinating things. It gets better by level, but it was something I talked about with Dylan Cruz, where it was like people were freaking out. Like, well, if Cruz isn't hitting as well in low A, high A, like what's he going to do in the upper levels? I'm like, I just watched Dylan Cruz get rung up 6 different times on pitches that weren't even close. And sometimes these guys have a better feel for the zone than the umpires at those lower levels. It gets better in double, but it's still not great. And then triple, as you mentioned, it gets better, and you have the challenge system. But it is something that you have to look at. And I can, I'll source and get information on like how many times they were called out looking on pitches that were just well out of the zone. And by the way, for Emmanuel Rodriguez, I think there was already 15 pitches that were well out of the zone that were called strikes. And I think a third of those were ended up in strikeouts, which is a lot in 39 games. Yeah. So like you can look at that, but I really try to cut the strikeout rate a little bit down when you look at guys that are just going to chase as little as they do and get rung up. They're not afraid to get rung up looking, which is good. You got to commit to that approach. You can't start to, have the bad zone pull you out of it. So it's something that you got to kind of keep in tune with. And that's where the live looks really do matter. But it is an important thing that I think makes the AAA adjustment even more important to zone in on, because while the zones aren't quite as good as the big leagues, that's where you can really see the patience work back into their favor and not against them.
And I want to work back to Zebby, because obviously he's probably the story of the year in this system in terms of breakneck pace. But what sold you on Luke Keeschel? Because, he hasn't been billed as the guy down there. And that's more because they've had Jenkins, Emmanuel Rodriguez. They've had Brooks Lee. They've had, before that, he didn't overlap with Royce Lewis, but it's been always very easy to identify the top hitting prospect in this system, whether it was Kirilloff for a spell, Buxton before. Like it's always been very easy to identify who's up there. And then Keeschel just kind of makes his way onto some lists. What was his hey, listen, pay attention to me kind of moment for you?
I think the way that he appeared in 2024. So I liked him out of college, and the Twins really seem to lean into now, funny enough, like the good swings, hit tool guys, and then see how it progresses from there. Yeah. And Keeschel was definitely hit over power at college. And I didn't love the swing mechanics, but it worked because he's just so good hand-eye wise, such good barrel accuracy, and a great approach as well. And the Twins really do identify those guys that have great approaches. Like everyone I feel like I'm looking at in the system is running a chase rate below 25%. Keeschel, by the way, it's 16. So nice. What stood out to me though, when he came back this year, added a little bit of strength, changed his pre-swing moves to be much more in tune with his lower half. Right, this guy was a wrestler, and one of the better wrestlers I think in his region in high school. So like, this is a guy that can use his body well and is strong and twitchy, and like just wasn't really doing it the way that he could tap into the most power possible. And then this year adds a couple miles per hour to his exit velocities, and then still has that feel to hit that was what made him an earlier round draft pick, and still has that approach. Then I was actually really impressed by the athleticism beyond that too. He's an above average runner. I think a big part of it was, where is he going to play defensively? Didn't get to prove that because of the elbow, but I saw him move around in center field and it didn't look bad. And I think with more reps, he could get comfortable there. Always have the fallback of second base or a left field. But I think he can be this like really fun, super utility type. But the big clear cut thing that stood out to me was a guy like that was hit and walk and approach over everything, adding power to the point where he's flashing exit velocities that, are 110, 111 miles an hour. Like that's a difference maker for me. Cause I didn't think he had that in the tank.
No question about it. Let's do this one and then we'll take our last break. Double A debut today for CJ Culpepper, who's number 15 on the pipeline list. When I look at him, like facially, he looks like a cross between Jared Weaver and Noah Syndergaard. And again, another guy who the Twins they haven't done where you draft like a David Price or Justin Verlander and they're just who they are out of college. They fire through the system and become that top-notch guy. Every guy that they've got that has come through the system has been, Bailey Ober was a college at Charleston, not a top pick who's become phenomenal. And all these guys, it's 4th round picks, it's 13th round picks. It's, it takes a village to make a pitching staff. And a lot of people would say, You got to be like the Guardians and build like the Guardians used to. You got to develop your pitchers. Well, I'm here to tell you, Mike Clevenger, they got traded for. The one we don't speak of got traded for. The Corey Kluber traded for. Like, you trade and develop. How you get your pitchers, nobody's keeping track of it. It's how you create them or turn them into big league pitchers. And so when I see guys like Culpepper, Morris, Corey Lewis all ramping up, popping up, it's hard for me not to be exciting. What do we need to know, though, about Culpepper? Because if he's on that fast track right behind Morris, who backfilled for Matthews at AAA, that's a fun little conga line to be watching.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to find many organizations that have been killing it more in the later rounds on pitchers than the Twins have. 13th rounder and CJ Culpepper. Even there's multiple fronts of why this is extremely valuable. One, they could turn out like Zebby Matthews and end up plugging in the rotation when you really need them. More irons in the fire. You never know who could elevate to that next degree. Or they end up plugging into a bullpen. And if I were a GM, I would never want to give up a ton for relievers. And clearly, I think the Twins feel the same way, having only going to get Richards. But
and Louis Varland might be their next big reliever. Or
yeah, exactly. Because you can adjust those guys. So just finding 13th rounders that can become big league role guys one way or another is huge. Or of course, then they end up being a trade chip. There's plenty of teams that would like CJ Culpepper as a complementary piece in a package too. And you identified that guy in the 13th round. It's been about health for me with him. And we actually had him as a number 10 prospect coming into the system coming into the season in the Twin system, because
he just came back from a forearm in July, I think.
Yeah. And that was the one thing. His slider's plus. And I think his slider is so good that should make him, a solid reliever at the very least, compared with the fastball that's, in the mid 90s, at least 93, 94 most of the time, but with good characteristics. So he's got that. He's got a cutter. I just think this is a dude that ultimately could serve a relief role, or it could be that like fringe 5-starter, but a 13th round pick to identify him. I think with the injury issues, maybe he's more of that swingman and reliever, but that slider is nasty. And he trusts it and he locates it consistently. Before, in so far this year, 43 plate appearances, 41 at bats against that slider. Opponents are hitting 122 with 21 strikeouts. So, I mean, that slider is a bona fide plus big league pitch that, it's just kind of a matter of the rest of the arsenal if he's going to stick as a starter. But that slider alone will make him a big league reliever.
Oh, love to hear it. Well, let's take our last break, and then when we come back, we'll run through a few things quick, get you out of here, but there's still plenty of meat on the bone. Let's take this last break. If you're not playing PrizePicks yet, now is the time. It's America's #1 DFS app for you to check out. Over 5 million active subscribers that you could be joining along with. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, because unlike other apps, you're not competing with other people. It's just you and the numbers. Over, under, more than, less than. You just got to choose that 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can be as risk adverse or risk happy as you wish, and the multipliers will reflect that. If you go super, super risky, you can get 100 times your money. So turn $10 into 1,000. But again, you got to find the ones that are the demon picks, the scary ones. The goblins are a little less scary, not as big multipliers, but you're more likely to win. And they've got you covered with promos every week. You can lower select player stats on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or on Fridays, get your lineup insured, or you get a losing lineup fee back. So we still have plenty of WNBA action to go, whether you want to watch the rookies, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, or some of the vets, Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, Kelsey Plum. There's tons of different players, tons of personalities. It's a lot of fun to watch because it's a game that is chock full of talent. Great players fall out of the league every year because it's just so few teams and so many players coming in. So the talent really is there. So check out PrizePicks, available in more than 30 states across the country. So find out if one of them is yours. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB, all one word, on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And I got to show some love for Liquid IV. Honestly, I accidentally bought the wrong stuff. And my wife texted me while we were on the show. She takes 2 packets with her to work every day. And she said this other stuff was making her sick. She's got to stick with the OG. The OG is IV, Liquid IV. It's a fun, sweet treat for you in the summer. It keeps you hydrated. You don't have to worry about all that sugar and how that's going to affect you as well. It just keeps you hydrated. And that's quite frankly all you need at this time of year. It's hot, it's sticky, it's stuffy. It's 81 degrees at my house right now with 67% humidity. You're basically going out and taking a swim. And with Liquid IV, you get all kinds of fun flavors. It's a great electrolyte drink. My favorite is Popsicle Firecracker, reminding you of those popsicles you used to chase down the ice cream truck for. Actually, I still do sometimes with my kiddos. And so this is powered by Liquid IV Hydroscience, which is an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. And again, did I say it tastes amazing? Not only is the Popsicle Firecracker flavor in play, but there's acai berry, lemon, lime, pina colada, you name it, they've got it. My wife even brought home pear the other day, and it was terrific. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. So when you think of the ascension that not Liquid IV, no, that Zebby Matthews, I got my mind on the sponsor, that Zebby Matthews has made, and to some extent, I mean, Tanner Morris is not terribly far off. Or sorry, Andrew Morris. I always say the wrong Morris. I don't know why I say that. I think Tanner Morris was the guy that retired earlier this year in the Twins system. Andrew Morris. They've had some fast-moving pitchers. What made Zebby such a natural candidate to move as quickly as he did? Because obviously, the command stood out to the point where he had 20-some innings without a walk to start a year. But with that said, you've got to have stuff to go with it. Otherwise, you're still going to get pummeled.
Exactly. And that's a kind of what happened. He's always been a guy that filled up the zone. And if you look at it, 2023, he still was throwing strikes with the best of them. 70% strike rate across the arsenal, 75% strike rate on the fastball was crazy. But then going into this year, he sees his fastball jump by 2 full ticks. Like, that's a big, big jump. And on top of that, still getting the same kind of carry and even a little bit more induced vertical break. So now you have a guy that always filled up the zone, so was just trying to miss barrels, that now says, hey, I'm going to get way more whiff in the zone so I can attack it even more confidently. Strike rate jumps to 77%, which is almost too much. I was almost concerned in his big league debut. I'm like, I hope he's not too in the zone. And he hit his spots really well. And, going east-west and then up at the top, it plays well. And that's the other thing is, control versus command. Right? Control, he's throwing strikes, but how's the command? The command's been great too. He's executing, he's hitting his spots. But then the arsenal jumps across the board where now that cutter slider ticks up to 90 instead of 87. And now that pitch is playing just even more devastating. And he has 3 distinct velocity separations now where it's that cutter slider, and then he has more of a true slider at 85. And that pitch is playing up better too because it's a couple of ticks harder. So, it would have been a little concerning if the secondaries ticked up a little bit more than the fastball, because then everything starts to get a little bit close. But has those 3 distinct velocities about 5 miles per hour apart. And then he mixes in that kind of taste-breaking curveball that's been a good pitch. So he has the more complete arsenal. He's seen his stuff tick up across the board. And then he didn't lose any of that command. Sometimes when you see guys, their stuff ticks up, they struggle to command it. They struggle to rein it in. It's like when you get a faster car and you're trying to handle it, it's a little bit more difficult. He has had no issue with that. And so I think that's the thing that really stands out is he's still that same command guy. It's like a hit tool guy finding power all of a sudden and still having the hit tool. Like, that's extremely exciting. Is this stuff off the charts? No, but he went from, iffy stuff to now above average stuff with great command. That should be a guy that's in the middle of a rotation, I think, for a while.
What makes Festa as good as he is? Because the start to this year, just like most young pitchers, there's going to be some turbulence, and even if it's whether it's a lot or a little, it's different. But when I see him now, the last start they got him out of there early just because of just the game was too important to risk letting him spiral out, so they went to the bullpen. But I see a guy who looks like he belongs. I see a guy who looks like it's he's not going to be an up down guy. I don't think he'll be up and possibly stay as long as there's spots. I just see a guy who's got pretty good polish, and I wonder what you see that made him in your top 100.
That improved polish, because I'd seen him a lot in the past, and it was always stuff, right? We're talking about a 6'6" right-hander that really works well. works down the mound, gets above average extension, really plus extension, and can throw it hard. But he could not command his stuff consistently. There were so many starts where I was just like slider. He became so dependent on the slider. He made some slight mechanical adjustments to allow him to kind of work more directionally and towards home plate. And as a result, he saw his fastball strike rate increase by like more than 5%. He could still be better in the command department, but if you're throwing a fastball for a strike at 55%, you're not getting up to the big leagues. Like he got it to the point where he was north of 60, and then he could, not have to lean on the slider as much. Also working more towards home, working more vertically instead of kind of side to side, allowed him to backspin the fastballs more and get more carry. So it's getting more, more ride on it. So it was playing better in the zone. Then I think also it allowed him to find a better feel for the changeup. So the development of that changeup, it just seemed like it was a multi-pronged positive development here where he's throwing more strikes, the fastball quality is better, and it allows the changeup to play up. And all of a sudden, a guy that I'm like, man, can he throw his fastball for a strike 60% of the time? Now he's throwing 3 pitches for a strike more than 64% of the time. So that was really what was the separator for me, because at points I was a little concerned that he was going to be too one-dimensional with the slider and it might end up being more of a swingman relief role. Now you got 3 distinct good pitches, a fastball that he trusts, and now the big question just becomes, can he consistently pound the zone, or is he going to be that volatile pitcher that you'll know as a Twins fan, like when he has it and when he doesn't? When he has it, it's 9+ Ks. When he doesn't, it's a short outing. I think he might kind of be that way, but he's still just 24 and 6'6". So the fact that he took this step forward this year, I think bodes really well for his long-term outlook. And the stuff's just too nasty.
I got 2 more questions to touch on if you've got time for it, if I don't want to too long. Where do you stand on Charlie Soto? Because he seems to be pretty polarizing. A lot of Twins fans still excited about his potential. The results have obviously been a little uneven. But again, as a teenager in A-ball, what do you expect?
Yeah, I mean, he's a kid, man. I actually got to see his first professional quote unquote outing in that spring breakout game, and you could just feel the jitters. His whole family was there, and he didn't look great, but you could just see how excited and just young. He was still 17 years older, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, this is a guy that I think it just turned 18. In terms of arm talent, right? He's a converted infielder, and you can see that. Like, you can see the athleticism and the talent on the mound, but you can also see that he's a converted infielder that hasn't had a lot of experience. So I think he's just extremely raw, which the way that the Twins have been able to develop arms, great. Sign me up for that project. And, I think it's going to take a little bit more time. I think it's been impressive that he's been able to just go out there and he'll have a bad outing, but like you said, he'll turn around and have another really good one. There's some things like where I think you need to almost kind of get into a pitch lab, look at some of the just release characteristics and things, because the fastball can flirt with the dead zone, which means it's going to be a lot easier for hitters to see, even though he has that sheer velocity. There's certain things that I think his pitches can kind of mesh together and they don't differentiate enough. And I think that's also why you see some mixed results. And then also just command not consistently being there, but I think it's gotten better as the year's gone on. He looks like an 18-year-old pitcher who didn't throw as much as his peers in high school. But I think when you look at what he can be, and what is there talent wise, he was a number 7 prospect for us in the system. And I think he's only elevated himself in my eyes this year. I'm very interested to see how he comes back after a full off season, after a full spring where the Twins are going to be hands-on, and see if it looks exactly the same or if there's some things heading in the right direction. My only key concern here is the fastball shape. And so if he can find something there, either to go to more of a true sinker or find some more ride with the fastball so it doesn't flirt with the dead zone as much, I think the rest will be really good, because the changeup's disgusting, and he's shown a pretty good feel to spin it too, which I wasn't expecting, because usually guys are a pronator or they're a supinator. Seems like you can do a little bit of both, but that changeup is a potentially plus pitch.
Well, and there's something to be said for the plus or minus of having not thrown much off the mound. I mean, it can cut both ways. I lied. I do have one more guy to ask about, because there were a bunch of questions that came through in the tweets about Marco Raya. And the reason why I think there's an interesting parallel structure here is obviously not at the same levels, but the Twins brought Bailey Ober along really slowly, like 78, 80 pitches in the major leagues, lifting him after 5 innings. And everyone's like, oh, this big, strong guy, but why not let him go? Well, now we've seen the fruits of that patience, and now he is that guy who can give you 6, 7 innings. Had a complete game earlier in the year. he's been built to who he is rather than having to survive those innings pushes that some guys have put upon them. They seem to be doing something similar with Raya. It's a low baby, slow baby way to go with it. And is it working? What do you think is the end game here? And are you in favor of how it's gone so far?
I think it's a little difficult to, and we actually had Raya right behind Soto at 8 in the preseason.
Okay.
And I think it's kind of been the status quo. It's hard to answer because of what we talked about earlier, where teams really keep injuries and issues close to their vest.
Is he hard to evaluate as a result of how he's being used?
Very much so.
Okay.
Very, very much so. And I think the other side of it is there was a lot, kind of around the draft and some concern, I think, about medicals and health then. And I don't like to speculate on injury, but I think that the fact that we haven't seen him scaled up really at all until recently a little bit more, but every year, I was like, okay, this will be the time that they start to scale him up. Then he'll miss a little bit of time. They don't really ramp up the pitches. I would venture to say that he maybe hasn't felt as great as some of his teammates may feel every fifth day. And for that reason, because of how talented he is, I think there's been probably a little bit more concern about the injury, either history or just possibility, than the Twins will lead on to believe. And whether they'll ever admit to that or not, just look at the game logs. And I think that would kind of tell you that. There's one thing, Dodgers do that too. A lot of teams will baby their guys, but look at Tink Hence now with the Cardinals. That was a guy that was similarly babied, just lapped him now in terms of how much they're ramping him up. At a certain point, you got to do it. And they still have been a little bit weird about that. The stuff is crazy. And I do think that with the way that, we've seen them use him, the way that the velo has kind of fluctuated at times, I think ultimately he does most safely project as, a lights out reliever. Cause I think that breaking ball is gross. The fastball is not as good as you would think. He doesn't command it well, and the shape isn't great. So I do think he's a guy that could thrive in relief and potentially multi-inning relief. And I do wonder if at what point they pivot to that. Because again, that slider is disgusting. He also has a curveball that's a separate pitch, and opponents just don't look comfortable against it at all. He's not the biggest. There's a lot of effort in the delivery. I ultimately think high leverage reliever makes sense, but I wouldn't rule out starter because he has looked much better of late. I don't know what's going on. I wish I knew the true medical history, but of course you're never going to know that. And just playing the percentages, I think it makes the most sense to have him as a reliever and a dominant one. And judging by the way that they've handled him, I think they probably feel that way too, ultimately.
All right. And the last thing I had for you is kind of walk me through how you felt about the top end of their draft. Kalen Culpepper, college shortstop, played third base before and, looked pretty good over there, but shortstop is kind of where they've got him right now. The beauty of up the middle athletes is you move them all over. They're like chess pieces, and that's why they go as highly as they do. But then, you go a little further down, you've got Billy Amick. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Desan Hill, Kyle DeBarge. All these guys for MLB Pipeline's money are top 15 guys kind of bunched up. Did you think they preferred one type or the other? Did they do a good job? What was your final evaluation of this top end of the class?
It's funny. So in our mock draft, that was one of the picks we actually got right because I had no information on that other than Kalen Culpepper screams exactly what the Twins love. I think his swing was one of the more advanced in the class. He's got a great chance. Even if he's not going to stick it short, he'd be a really good third baseman. The power ticked up down the stretch, but that the swing mechanics and the approach, I was like, okay, this is a guy that definitely fits the bill. And sure enough, the Twins ended up grabbing him. What I like is, he's that high floor guy, high probability, I think big league regular, relatively speaking. And he still have a little bit of upside because of the athleticism and a chance to maybe stick it short. But I think he's got a good chance of just being an above average bat, on the left side of the infield with that swing too. And the way he finished the year was torrid. But then they go high floor and then pivot the total opposite way, which I love. They'll mix in the high upside volatility guys too. And that's exactly what Billy Amick is. That's a guy that swings and misses a lot, and it's going to take some tolerance and some patience, but also has some of the best raw power in the entire draft class. We saw that with what he did in games, but also just some of the exit velocities he flashed. So I think there's going to be a little bit more of a slow progression for him, but I like the balance of high floor, hit first guy, and then, I think wide range of outcomes, volatile, massive power hitter as well, and Billy Amick. So I thought that was a fun balance of the two there.
Did you like Desan Hill?
I thought that was another fun mix in there because, with Hill, the way that they've been able to develop arms, you're getting a left-hander who's 6'4", still has so much more room to add strength to the frame and already has a decent feel to spin it. Like I thought that was them again saying, hey, we're getting a hunk of like clay here. And we know that we can mold this well because 6'4", 170-pound, lefty that is as athletic as he is, like I'm sure they're just chomping at the bit to start working with him.
Well, hey, thank you so much for taking this amount of time out of your day. A little more than I expected, but again, it's pretty hard to cut you off when you're rolling pretty good. So again, he's Aram Leighton. Where can they check out your stuff? I know Just Baseball, your Twitter handle is on the screen, but what else are you cooking on right now? Because even though prospect season is ramped down a little bit because the draft is over, you're still probably working on things that maybe we aren't thinking about.
Makes it easier for me to catch up on the team top prospect list. So we're going to be finishing out the top prospect list for each team, updating all of them as well. So the Twins will be updated sooner rather than later. And then our prospect podcast, The Call Up, interviewing players all the time, including, Twins prospects as well. Hoping to get a couple of Twins guys on at some point this year, but we did have Canarino before the season. And then of course the Just Baseball show, our flagship podcast every single day, get you up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball. But yeah, the prospect list, the top 100 over at justbaseball.com. And we'll update that every couple months. And it's always a lot of fun, but thank you so much for having me on. And it's always a blast to talk about one of baseball's best systems.
It's always a blast to be covering a team that has some pretty good prospects because it makes for pretty good audio. Well, he's Aram Leighton. Check him out, justbaseball.com, at Aram Leighton 8 on the tweets. I'm Brandon Warren signing off saying thank you so much. And we'll see you tomorrow night.